No, we're fine. Is that on? Is it on? Oh, okay. You're fine. Yeah. All right. Should we start?
Did we get a thumbs up from Katie?
Okay, should we start? But people are still filing in.
The lights are going down.
Do you want to wait?
Say, please take your seats. I'll spend it. You can do it.
All right. Please take your seats. All school meeting is about to begin. All right. When it comes to slavery, there is a common misconception that it has been abolished and therefore it is just a thing of the past. However, that is not the case. More and more cases have shown that child trafficking and slavery is on the rise, yet it is hardly known. Next slide, please. Take a look at these headlines. These are just a few among the thousands of headlines regarding child slavery in all parts of the globe. Next slide, please. Around 150 million children worldwide are involved in child labor. Poverty often pushes these kids into these jobs because they have to supply income for their families. Other times, they are kidnapped and forced to work. The children often work for big, well-known companies that use child labor because it is the cheapest form of labor.
The International Labor Organization defines child labor as anyone under the age of 18 performing labor that is harmful to their health, safety, and morals. Most of the children involved are between the ages of 5 and 14. Geographically, in the world's poorest countries, 1 in 4 people are working in hazardous conditions. Next slide, please. This is a chart showing the population of children in child labor compared to the overall population of children. Regions like Latin America, the Caribbean, East Asia, Middle East, and North Africa have around 10% of children involved in child labor. In Eastern, Southern, Western, Central, and Sub-Saharan Africa, about 28% of their child population is working in hazardous conditions. We would now like to invite Ava and Grace to the stage to talk about one of the industries that children in these regions work for.
So how many of you here like chocolate? But how many of you actually know where chocolate comes from? So up here, next slide, you might recognize some of the brands such as Hershey, Nestle, and Mars, which have all admitted to using child slavery. 70% of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa, where child trafficking is most prominent in the chocolate industry. Some children starve themselves to help their families, while others are sold directly by their relatives to produce more money. The majority of children cut themselves working with the cocoa beans because they have to cut the cocoa beans open with machetes, which leave scars all over their arms, but they cannot receive any medical attention, which can lead to more serious and permanent damage. The workday begins at 6 and ends late in the evening with little to no breaks, and the children can earn as little as 25 to 50 cents for a day that they have to use to feed themselves as well as their families. Many countries like Nigeria and the Ivory Coast force child labor, and 1.8 million children work in the fields of Ghana. Child trafficking takes kids from a very young age and prevents them from having an education. Thank you.
Okay, so some statistics are shown that like 40% of these workers are female, which are usually around the ages of 12 to 16. And however, like some of these children are even found working at the age of 5, which is crazy if you look in America. And the chart to the left shows which countries take part in child labor and trafficking and how much the rest of the world uses the chocolate produced. So, and it's concerning for us to see that 5 of these countries, all of the ones listed, all take part in child labor and trafficking. And we believe it's really important for us to come together as a community and other people around the world to try and end this. And we'd like to introduce Julia and Audrey to come up and talk about clothing.
Okay, hi guys. So, how many of you guys like to shop at places like Zara or H&M? Nobody? Okay. Well, you guys might be surprised about how many American and European brands sell clothing made from children forced into working in these factories. So, around the world, child trafficking is a huge problem in the clothing industry. Many children around the globe work making clothing for stores like Walmart, JCPenney, and other brands like that. And around the world, 260 million children ages 5 to 16 are in employment around the world. And recently, Zara was accused of having multiple slave labor factories in Argentina, saying that people as young as 14 worked 11-hour days and even lived in terrible living conditions in the factories. So, there you go.
Next slide, please. Also, in fact, clothing factories in Bangladesh, there are about 1 million enslaved children between the ages of 10 and 14, which isn't much younger than all of us here. In general, most trafficked children, they don't have the opportunity like us to go to school, and instead they have to spend over 12 hours a day sewing garments and dyeing fabrics, which isn't anything anyone wants to do. But in return for their work, the children are only paid $6.50 a month, which, as you can see based on the graph, is a lot less than the minimum hourly wage here in the US. And everything that they earn is used to help their families, and even then it's barely enough to survive. I'd now like to invite Bridget and Kennedy to the stage to talk about sex slavery.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about sex slavery. So what is child sex slavery? The definition is that it's commercial sex exploitation that includes pornography, prostitution, and sex trafficking of women and girls. It's characterized by the exploitation of a human being exchanged for goods or money. And each year, an estimated 800,000 women and children are trafficked across international borders. Through additional numbers of women and girls are trafficked within countries. 75% of those are said to have been sold or advertised online. 325,000 children are at risk for becoming victim of sexual exploitation. And the average entry into the sex trade in America is 12 to 14 years old, younger than most of you.
So as you can see, the average pimp makes $150,000 to $200,000 per child each year, while they exploit around 4 to 6 children. And as you can see from this news article, it still happens today. And from this map, you can tell that based off of the colors, you can see which countries are more common to send out children for sex slavery or receive them.
Now we're introducing fishing.
Hi, Michael and I are going to talk about child slavery in the fishing industry. Next slide. Thailand is a world-leading supplier of tuna export and is counted to 52% of the world's tuna export. Fishing industry, child slavery in fishing industry is mainly prevalent in countries like Ghana, Thailand, Philippines, and Peru. According to the ILO, 6 out of 10 workers working in the industry are child forced labor, and children who work in the industry work for long hours with no pay, do not attend school, and are often malnutritioned, sleep deprived, and treated abusively.
Next slide, please. Children in fishing industry are often faced with tremendous tasks such as deep diving to untangle the nets. Fishing industry is one of the most dangerous industries for children to work in. They're faced with dangerous muscle and skeletal injuries caused by heavy lifting. They often have skin and respiratory disease that are caused by usage of dangerous chemicals with no safety measurements of any kind. Now I would like to invite Mr. World to introduce our speaker.
All right, and before I introduce Eric and Lori, I just want you to think about those statistics that were just presented, because it's one thing to raise awareness, it's another thing to actually try to take action and prevent these things from perpetuating. You can very easily go to the store and find fair trade chocolate, which means it did not use any type of child labor or sweatshop labor. So there's things you can do to prevent this from happening. So just think of that in advance. We're very pleased to have Lori and Eric here. They are the founders of The Right to Be Free, a nonprofit organization dedicated to freeing children and women who are victims of slavery, exploitation, and other oppressive conditions. Eric has managed and led humanitarian and social service programs that focus on reducing poverty and improving the worth and dignity of children, women, and the most vulnerable in society. Eric also works closely with the government, law enforcement, and judiciary agencies in Ghana to help combat child trafficking. He has been a key advocate in establishing the Anti-Human Trafficking Unit of the Ghana Police, and his efforts and achievements have been featured in the New York Times, the Oprah Winfrey Show, ABC News, and in a documentary called Not My Life. It's with great pleasure that I once again welcome Lori Dillon and Eric Peasah to Lake Forest Academy, and I thank them for all the great work they do to help protect women and children from being exploited. Thank you.
Step up. Good afternoon. I want to compliment Sam Wold and also all the students of the Amnesty International Club for an excellent presentation. It's a tough subject, but I thought they covered a very large and complex subject really well in the short time that they had. And as you can see, child trafficking and child labor is prevalent in virtually every country in the world. It's also illegal in every country in the world, but enforcement is very challenging, as you can imagine. As Sam mentioned, Mr. Wold mentioned, Eric and I have our respective foundations called Right to Be Free, and we focus on the liberation of trafficked children in Ghana, primarily in the fishing industry, but also in the gold mining and chocolate industry. And as you can see from the statistics that you saw, human trafficking is a huge problem. It's the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. It's second only to the drug trafficking, and it's already surpassed the arms trade. In all three criminal industry, the drug, human trafficking, and arms trade, they have a very incestuous relationship. They're often used to finance one another. A good example would be Boko Haram, the terrorist group. They kidnapped over 200 Nigerian girls, and unfortunately, it's really escaped a lot of our consciousness right now, but that was a really big event several years ago, and most of the girls have not been found, and they were used to be sold in the sex trade. And ISIS, they use three basic forms of income, and one of them is human trafficking. There's also extortion and black market oil sales, and they use that to fuel their terrorism. Human trafficking generates $150 billion a year in profits. So greed and profits prey on the vulnerable, and that's why we have so many victims. So what we do is we go into the fishing industry that's very prevalent on Lake Volta, and we rescue children. And I'm going to hand it over to Eric so he can talk more about that work, and we'll show you a video of what we do.
Thank you very much, Laurie, and I'm glad to be here once again. I think that the students showed us, or explained to us some of the basic things that trafficking is all about. I've worked on trafficking in several countries, in Somalia, in Nairobi, in Moldova, in other countries. And I believe that the problem is something that all of us need to know. I always tell students that all of us we are at risk. You can be trafficked. It doesn't matter your level of education if you don't know. So it's good for us to seek information, learn more about it, and then we'll look at it. So I would like them to watch a short documentary first. Then after that, I'll just say some few words just to support what the students taught us about. Then we can ask some few questions so that we can save some time. So, can the commentary go now?
Lake Volta is the world's largest man-made lake and is known for its beautiful scenery. It is also where thousands of trafficked children work every day. These children, some as young as 4 years old, work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. They navigate large fishing boats, bail water, pull up fishing nets, and dive under the water, which reaches depths up to 246 feet to untangle fishing nets caught on tree stumps. Sometimes they get caught in the nets and drown. They are allowed one small meal a day, which they are sometimes allowed to eat only after working 4 to 6 hours, and that meager meal is sometimes withheld as punishment. And he's about 8 years old?
Yeah, so 8, yeah, between 8 and 9.
These enslaved children are forced to do work that even adults would find exhausting. Their overdeveloped bodies suffer microfractures, which weaken their bones and increase the likelihood of fractures or breakage. Even if they are rescued, the children often do not reach their full height. Signs of physical abuse, harsh living conditions, and injuries are commonplace. Thanks to Eric Peasah and his staff, 17 young boys and 4 girls were saved from these inhumane conditions. At the rehabilitation center, they received medical care and counseling and were finally free to laugh and play like normal children. They also received a basic education in a classroom setting to support their transition to school. Jojo and Manu, both 8 years old, and Ernest, who is 7, were rescued in the slum area of Tema, where they were living together in a wooden shack. They ran errands for drug addicts in exchange for bread in order to survive. The rescued children are united with their families, relatives, or foster parents once it is deemed to be a safe and stable environment. For children where this is not an option, they are placed in a shelter supported by Right to Be Free. The children are now enrolled in school where they will receive an education that will place them on a path to personal and economic independence. Where necessary, Right to Be Free supports the children's cost for school uniforms, books, and fees. Unfortunately, one young rescued boy named Senyo is not going to school. He fell while fishing and struck his chest on the wood seat of the boat. 3 years later, after his fall, he was rescued by Eric and was taken to the hospital for medical treatment.
In listening to the history and in examining him, what I find is that there is a bend in his spine. This bend, the spine is supposed to be like this, and his spine is bent this way. This bend comes with about 2 or 3 of his bones crushed. This bend is something that we call a gibbous. Now, what is happening then is there is compression on his spinal cord at that level. And so the function of the spinal cord from that level below is affected. And that is why his walking is affected, his control of his urine is affected, and his control of his feces is also affected.
Senyo undergoes further testing, and the doctor says he will need spine reconstruction surgery. Right to Be Free hopes to raise funds for his back surgery, which will cost an estimated $23,000. Here are Senyo's 2 older brothers, Yao and Kafu, who, according to Senyo, are still working in servitude for a fisherman on Lake Volta. Eric tracked the boys down and hopes to raise funds to rescue them soon before anything happens to them. And hopefully one day they will become like this young man, Never, who was rescued by Eric in 2004 and now assists him with his community outreach to stop child trafficking. Never was 8 years old when he was trafficked and worked for 3 years on Lake Volta before he was rescued. Now he helps Eric speak to villages where trafficked children are taken. Through an interpreter, Never articulately recalls his experience as a child slave working on Lake Volta.
Some of you will be surprised that tears will run through my eyes. It's very, very difficult. You are not ready to go into the water, but you are forced to go into the water. I have only 5 minutes. Sometimes I come out bleeding from the ears
Abere,
then from
yin
the
tonto
nose,
ngati mekulu to mekata ono.
because I went too deep into the water.
Abe uglo.
And sometimes when you go, you were not able to remove the net from the stem that is holding it. And you have to come back and breathe and go back. Holding the edges of the canoe to relax a little bit. Your wicked master will land the paddle on your knees. This is a paddle wound. This is a paddle wound. I was still bleeding, but I was still working. That was when I need my mother most. I just missed my mother by then. It was very, very bad. But there was a good news. In 2004, this man you are looking at here, he doesn't look like a rich man. And he's not rich too. Do you know why? He invested all the money he has on us, on we the traffic children, so that we can have a better future. He came like an angel and he rescued me. I completed senior high school.
The second school, though.
I went to Data Link University.
At the Data Link University.
I've done with my diploma.
Diploma.
And still through him, I know I'm going to do my degree and master's. That it is very, very important for every child to be in school. Then the community here will be a better place for us. Thank you and God bless you.
These are some of the children that were rescued this year. With your support, one day all trafficked children will be free and have an opportunity to go to school like never. Every child has the right to be free.
Kosisikeleli Afrika Malupakanisu Dumorayo Israel mitanda zoyetu Kosi Sikelela Tina Lusaporayo Kosi Sikeleli Afrika Malupakanisu Tumorayo Israel mitanda zoyetu.
Thank you very much. So that's what we do in summary. I believe that if we can leave some few time for you to ask questions, so I can clarify a lot of things. If this, so I'll leave it here. You know, every year we receive a lot of children from other parts of the world, and within Ghana to come to visit us. We take them around to show them what is this like as poverty. Most of them, when they come, their lives are never the same. There was a boy in California called Tyler. He watched our show, an Oprah show, and then he said, "Mommy, I want to do something about it." So he formed a group called themselves Kids Helping Kids. And they made a trip to Ghana with his mother and some other friends. And the mom told me that when they went back home, their life was never been the same because they didn't know what they have until they went there to see what people don't have. So trafficking is real. And we have devoted our lives to fight it. I don't care which country it is. When they call me, I'll just go and help educate people on trafficking. So I'll pause here, and I'll leave you, if you have any questions or clarifications, for the next few minutes so we can run up. Thank you. Anybody have any questions, clarifications that you want to know from all the speeches that we give from the students? Yes, please.
Because of that. So do you think that's a prevalent issue? Do you see that often?
Yeah.
Do you want to summarize the question?
Yeah, okay. She was saying that some young women, when they traffic because of sex issue, they have stigma. Yes, we have a lot of, we experienced that kind of, I quite remember, I brought some 12 girls from Saudi Arabia to Somalia. They were trafficked there for sex slave. When we brought them in, they live in a Muslim country where those things haram. So most of them couldn't go back home because of what they went through. So we have to find a shelter, put them there, help them, prepare them, and make sure that we find a story for their parents or for their people they're going to take them. So it's a problem. But when you work with them through social workers, through counseling and things, some of them will welcome them. Some of them will never go home again. They want to stay on their own somewhere. Yeah. Any question? Anybody have any question?
I just wanted to mention one thing. As I've traveled, I've seen children working in different parts of the world. In Egypt, I remember students or children trying to sell us things, and you see that in many parts of the world. I remember students at a rug shop and a carpet shop in the back working on these beautiful rugs that they didn't really get paid for. And what really drove it home with me is I was with my students in Egypt, and these students came up to me and these kids came up to me and asked to buy candy from them or gum. And I was holding a Frisbee, and we were playing Frisbee with some of my students. And as soon as they saw the Frisbee, they dropped all of the stuff they were trying to sell, and they just wanted to play Frisbee. So in the end, you have to realize that these are kids, and you need to view them as children. They just want to play, they want to have fun, they want to go to school, and that's what Eric and Lori are doing, is providing these children with a chance at the same opportunity I think most of us take for granted.
Yeah. Anyone? Yes, please. One, most of the families don't desire to keep the children there. They don't desire to keep the children there because of poverty. That's why they give the children out. So once you bring you bring the children to the family, we try to find out why they give them out at all in the first place. And most of them are because of poverty issues. So we try to help them with something we call a grant, microcredit grant, that we help them do. And that's what is sustaining our project, because once they have the grant, the children you brought back and the other siblings are all protected from being given out again. Now, how do we go about it? There are several ways of going about it. Like this year, for example, I had some law enforcement officials with me. We went on the lake, we found some children, we rescued them, and we gave the fishermen to the officials to handle. Some of them, too, we have informants in the various communities we work. They tell us there's a case here, this case has been trafficked here and there. We go there, we do underground studies, intelligence, then we approach the fisherman and tell, listen, let the child go because the child has to go to school, and what you are doing is against the law. Some of them, too, we look for the parents of these kids, we trace them where they are, and we help them that your child is going through this problem, so let's go and withdraw the children. So we do that. So we have several ways of going about finding out how to rescue the children. Yeah, any more questions? Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
Is it working? Okay. How do you prevent trafficking?
How do you prevent trafficking? We have a lot of root causes of trafficking. One of them is poverty. 2, ignorance. 3, so that's the basic, poverty and ignorance, one of the basic things. So what we do, we do a lot of education. A lot of education. Yesterday, I was speaking at a function somewhere in Lake Forest, and one parent who came to Ghana said, Eric, 3 years ago when I came to Ghana, people don't talk about trafficking. People are not even aware. When I came there months back, everybody's talking about trafficking is bad, they are aware about it because we are doing a lot of education. And I believe that even in the States here, most of you as KSA students here, you need to know what is happening. There's a documentary that I wish we have time, maybe I'll talk to Mr. Wood, he can show it to you, which happens here. You need to know what is happening because all of us, you can be at risk. Most of you are on social media, am I right? Doing Facebook, doing all kinds of stuff. There are a lot of risks out there. So let's all try and be careful. We'll let Mr. Wood once, we'll pass a documentary to you for you to show it to them. It's about 6 minutes when you have time. And then let them watch it and discuss it about what happens with, you see, in every country they're showing you, they're talking about the issue. Every country have a way the traffickers get them. In Africa, that's our approach. That's how we do labor, forced labor. In the US, it's different. In Europe, it's different. So you need to know what happened within your country so that you know how to protect yourself, your family, your friends, and your brothers and sisters.
And there's an indirect way of supporting it too, like I mentioned before. I mean, if you're going to Starbucks, for example, and you're buying a cup of coffee, and you're not checking on that to see that it's fair trade coffee, you might be supporting child trafficking. There's a good chance that you probably are in the coffee industry as well. So there is an indirect way of supporting it without knowing it, and I think that's where education comes in, because if you do know that, it's a simple check. You look at the back of the bag, if it says fair trade certified, you know it's not supporting child trafficking. So there's some things you can do.
Yeah. Any more? Yes. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add is when Eric and I first came 2 years ago, we showed another documentary. A couple of the scenes in this one stemmed from that one as well. And I encourage those that didn't see it to watch it. It's on our website, righttobefree.org. So RIGHTTOBEFREE.org. And you just click on videos and it'll be the one at the top. And it gives a really good, it's a brief video, and it gives a really good review of the child trafficking situation in Ghana and our work to address that problem. Because in the definition of what is human trafficking, the second element is the means. How do they do it? And it's force or fraud. So a lot of parents have no idea that their child was trafficked. When they give it up to a fisherman, the fisherman has promised the parents, we'll put your child in school. Or if it's a girl, they sometimes work on the lake, but they often work as domestic servants. And we'll put them in school and they can help us on spring breaks. And the parents are thinking like, the average Ghanaian income is $3 a day, and that has to pay for everything. And so the last thing they can afford is school. So they think, I'm giving my child a better life. They'll learn a trade so they can hopefully support themselves someday, and they'll go to school. They have no idea that the child has been trafficked, and they're working 14 hours a day, being emotionally and physically abused, and not going to school. So that's how trafficking happens, is through fraud and deceit. And as Eric mentioned, it can happen to any of you. Eric said anyone, including himself, can be trafficked under the right conditions. And so that's why it's so important to be educated about what human trafficking is, because traffickers are becoming more and more cunning, sophisticated, and savvy. And what looks to be a certain way is not. And that's why in order to protect yourself, it is such a lucrative business, and we're becoming much more of a global society. Information is power. And when my daughter was your age, she was a sophomore at Lake Forest High School, we had the opportunity to go to Ghana. Eric and I had already established a relationship, and he invited our family to go on a rescue mission with him. So I had to clear out the logistics first with my daughter Claire, her school, my husband, who wasn't going to come with us, and because I also have a son and he was younger, and a dog. But anyway, so, because traveling that distance, it takes some planning. And I also checked with Lisa Ling, a journalist who I knew, who had made the trip the year prior, just to get the lay of the land, because it's not something I wanted to say yes to too quickly without having some preparation. Because I knew the minute I mentioned it to Claire, she would say, we're going. And I wouldn't be able to put that genie back in the bottle. So I was right. The minute I mentioned it to her, she said, when are we going? And I'll arrange my schedule with my teachers. And I have to say that it was the most amazing opportunity. Yes, it's a challenging trip because you're going to a developing country that's very poor. But if you have an opportunity to go, I really encourage you to go. When I was your age, we didn't have these kind of opportunities. And you are in one of the best high schools in the country, which means in the world. And the opportunities you have and things that, your teachers, wonderful teachers like Mr. Wold are bringing to your doorstep are amazing. And you may not appreciate and understand these opportunities now, but when you get into college and you get into your jobs and you have this global perspective, it will enrich everything else you do and see, because now you have that experience there. And you can see our videos, you can read about it, you can see it on the news, but when you're there and you're experiencing that culture for the first time, and you experience and see what they do, that is an education that cannot be replicated in any classroom or what we can bring to you here today. We try. So I really encourage you that if you have the opportunity to go, and it will change your life forever for the good. So does anyone have any other questions?
Well, and you do have the opportunity, and that's one other way you can help. I mean, I presented this earlier this year, but we are focusing on child trafficking all year for Amnesty International. So one way to help get involved with Amnesty, you already have like 30 or 40 people that are participating in our meetings, so it's been great. The trip to Ghana, Eric is very excited to meet with us when we're there. We will be working with Right to Be Free. We will be working with other organizations, stopping at schools, bringing supplies, and trying to help out as much as we can. So your applications are due by Monday, and we already have a good amount of people that have applied, but I wanted to wait till after this all-school meeting to give you a chance to hear from Lori and Eric before I had the deadline for the applications. So if you are interested, get those to me. Come see me this week if you need more information. But I wanted to thank Lori and Eric once again for all the great work they do, and if we can help you in any way and support you, just let us know. Thanks so much. And Lori is welcoming anybody to contact her if they need more information about her experience in Ghana. And Eric and Lori will be here for a few minutes, so if you'd like to come down and meet them or ask them some questions that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, feel free. All school meeting is dismissed.